Welcome back to the second course stream of week 2, the Romance of the Three Kingdoms, 三国演义. Now, for this week's reading quiz, please focus on the key characters in the novel that are mentioned in this course stream. Again, you don't have to focus on every character, you don't have to focus on every detail, but let's focus on the main characters whom we will discuss in this course stream. Now, if you choose to write a reading response for this week, maybe you could bear the following questions in mind. How does the novel portray or explore the conflict between Confucian values, that is, the relationship between ruler and subject, acceptance of hierarchy, responsibility of virtuous government and leadership, and the right to or the need to defy such orders, to rebel? Who are our main heroes and villains? And what are they fighting for? Which of these do you like or dislike, and why? And for all of these, please make sure to provide textual evidence, and to quote, and to give me a page number and a name. Don't give me summaries. Okay, here it is again, that interactive map from Wikipedia. And here's, of course, the opening phrase from the chapter. Here begins our tale. The empire long divided must unite. Long united must divide. 话说天下大势，分久必合，合久必分. And I mentioned, I think last week, that this theme of unity being replaced by chaos, and chaos then necessarily being brought into order again, represents very much this Confucian view of history as being cyclical, right? Now, our novel, of course, really starts with a chapter heading, right? And the chapter heading reads, Three bold spirits plight mutual faith in the peach garden. Heroes and champions win first honors, fighting the yellow scarves. 演桃园豪杰三结义，斩黄金英雄首立功. Now, this is a very typical opening for a classical Chinese novel, in that it almost gives us sort of a summary of what is going to happen in the chapter, and that this opening often almost reads, like a poem. You might even have a parallel clause. Now, what's also very typical is the ending of these chapters. And the ending, if you've already started to read, you will have noticed, and if you haven't, you will soon notice, is that they always end with a cliffhanger, right? They keep you in suspense. Something might happen, but it's not quite resolved, and you have to keep on reading. Now, in both of this, the sort of the summary of the previous chapter, or of what might happen in the chapter, and then the cliffhanger is most likely a leftover from the storytelling tradition, right? Of keeping your audience engaged, reminding them of what has happened and what might happen, and keeping them in suspense so that we'll come back the next day when you continue with the story. So this has lived on even after storytelling was replaced by essentially consumption of books. It's sort of a convention. Now, the book itself, the first chapter, opens, I think, in a very interesting way. How does it open? It opens with all these inauspicious omens, all these bad omens that really tell us that something pretty bad is probably about to happen, right? So it portends already the dynastic decline. We get a very good sense of that, right? With all that stuff happening. And then, of course, there is eventually, right, we witness the corruption at court, the usurpation of the power of the 10 eunuchs, right? We already know that this is really a historical reality. And then there is that outbreak of that rebellion, right, that shakes the 8 provinces of the realm. And the 8 provinces And again, there's a map on the left, and some of these, of course, will reappear in the story. So you might want to become familiar with them. There's Qingzhou, and Zhou usually just refers to a province, right? So there's Qingzhou, Youzhou, Xuzhou, Jizhou, Jingzhou, Yangzhou, and Yanzhou, and Yuzhou. You might also compare this map to our map in the book. Yeah. Now, I won't ask in the quiz about any of these place names yet. Maybe later on, but not this week. We'll really focus more on some of the main characters. And who are our main characters? Who are then these three bold spirits who forged, this bond in the peach garden? There is, of course, first and foremost, there's Liu Bei, who has a style or courtesy name called Xuan De. You will notice that all of these heroes or villains are usually introduced with at least two names, their name and then their courtesy name or their style name, which is often a name that is bestowed upon them later on in life, and often by a friend or a mentor, and that sort of characterizes their, what they represent, what they're good at, what they embody, right? And his Liu Bei's style name is Xuan De, something like hidden virtue, right? So he's somebody obviously very virtuous. And he is distantly related to the imperial line, we learn. His father already commended for filial devotion, right? This is one of the Confucian virtues, to be, filial to your parents or to your ruler. So he's full of devotion and integrity. Liu Bei volunteers to suppress the rebels, and he usually carries a pair of matching double-edged swords. Often he has rosy cheeks. He's portrayed often with rosy cheeks. Not so much here. This is a Japanese woodblock print of him, and you can see him sort of standing there, resting on one of his swords. The next of the three swan brothers is Zhang Fei, style name Yi De. So again, we have De there, virtue, plentiful, plenty of virtue, something like that. And a man 8 spans tall, a thunderous voice, and a stance like a dashing horse, carries an 18 span steel spear. And then finally, there's Guan Yu, or Lord Guan, a man of enormous height, 9 spans tall, with a 2-foot long beard and ruddy cheeks, carrying a heavy crescent moon blade. So the three of them then, right, very clearly, they embody righteousness and virtue, right? We right away get a sense that these are the good guys, right? They are the good guys in the novel. There's no doubt about that. Now, I promised you that we would look at the way these heroes and these episodes are represented in culture, in popular culture, in various forms of popular culture. Here on the left, we have Liu Bei, portrayed in Beijing opera. I think you can see his rosy cheeks there. And then Guan Yu and Zhang Fei here on the right. Guan Yu often portrayed with a red face and a long beard, and Zhang Fei often with a darker face, also with a beard and often a very dark face. And then on the bottom, you have the two again, Guan Yu and Zhang Fei, as shadow figures for shadow play. Yeah, the upper ones are hand puppets, budai which is sort of puppet theater, and I'll show you some more examples of that later on. I have something very cool at the end of this course stream, so stay tuned for that. Now, the three of them then, right? They meet in this garden and they take an oath, right? What kind of oath is it? Let's read this together. This is kind of interesting. This is kind of important. We three, though of separate ancestry, join in brotherhood here, combining strength and purpose to relieve the present crisis. We will perform our duty to the emperor and protect the common folk of the land. We dare not hope to be together always, but hereby vow to die the selfsame day. So a lot of really important things are being said here in this vow. Right? First of all, of course, this idea of joining in brotherhood, that they become sworn brothers. And then, of course, this promise to relieve the present crisis, right? That they want to fight these rebels. And this already, in a way, indicates their allegiance to the emperor, their allegiance to the Han dynasty. They want to keep the dynasty intact. They want to be loyal to the emperor. And then, very important, they want to protect the common people, right? So I said earlier, there's no doubt that these are the good guys. Why is that? They're loyal to the emperor, right? There is this sense of loyalty to your ruler. Very Confucian. And then there is this idea of serving the common people, serving the common folk, not your own benefit, not your own profit, but the people. So, likewise, a Confucian virtue, right, to serve the common people. Now, what do they set out to accomplish in the following chapters then? And how is their service rewarded? So again, these are questions that you might want to think about, for your reading response, or maybe these are questions that might come up in our quiz. So as you read through the chapters, these are things you might want to bear in mind. How are their characters different, and how do they complement each other? Right? Very interesting. So Liu Bei, Lord Guan, and Zhang Fei, they're all very different, right? Very different. In what way? Why is Wancheng an important location in the opening of the novel as far as our three heroes are concerned? And in what way does Lord Guan distinguish himself at Xuzhou or in other situations? What role is Liu Bei destined to play? So these are some of the questions you might want to bear in mind as you read through the first chapters of the novel. Now, there are some other characters whom we encounter in the opening chapters and who will continue to stay with us and who are really, really key characters. So we've already encountered Cao Cao, right? We've already encountered him. His style name is Meng De. He's described to us as a tall, narrow-eyed, with a long beard, right? They all have beards. A boy with ingenious ideas, at 20 recommended for filial devotion and personal integrity. Bravely fights the yellow scarf. So he also fights this rebellion, and at first seems like somebody like Liu Bei, who's a virtuous guy, a good guy. But then later on, you will see that Cao Cao is actually not as singularly virtuous as Liu Bei, but that in many ways he's a much more complex character. Yeah, he's a complex character because in a way he embodies not just one side of human nature, not just the virtuous and good side that arguably doesn't really exist, right? Nobody is 100% good. But he also is very cunning, right? He's very cunning. And he wants to rule. He wants to become the ruler of the Han dynasty. So it was a lot more complex because he really represents the different sides that rest within a human, that make up a human, right? So what role does he play in the novel then? And why is he one of the most complex characters in Chinese literary culture? You might want to look at page 12. And I've kind of already answered the question, right? Anyway, there's Sun Jian, a body powerful as a tiger's, a torso thick as a bear's, related to Sun Tzu, whom you might know. If you don't, maybe look him up on Wikipedia. Because of bravery, recommended for a post of military commander. So Sun Jian plays an important role early on because he finds something in the ruins of Luoyang. What does he find there, and why is this important? Again, something you might want to look out for as you read through the chapters. So these are key characters, especially with regard to the three kingdoms, right, that we talked about in the previous slide, Wei, Shu, and Wu. And then there are some other characters that are important, especially in the opening chapters. There's Gong Sun Zan. You you might want to bear his name in mind and his relation to Liu Bei. There's Yuan Shao, right? We actually came across his name when we were talking about the warlords. He was one of the northern warlords who controlled a lot of the northern territory and who formed an alliance. There's Dong Zhuo. I'll say a little bit about him in a minute. There's Lü Bu. Both of these arch villains, some of the really bad guys in the novel. So again, when those names come up, you want to pay attention. And then there's this really intriguing figure of Diao Chan here on the right. She is one of the very few really important female characters in the novel. And again, you might want to focus on the fact, on why she's such an important character. And finally, there's Liu Biao. And Liu Biao stands in a close relationship to Liu Bei in the first chapters, especially Liu Biao's wife, or second wife, who doesn't like Liu Bei, and she actually goes as far as wanting him to be executed. So this is an episode that you might want to pay a little bit of attention to. Good. So I said we wanted to talk a little bit about Dong Zhuo. How is he introduced to the reader, and how does he differ from most of the other characters discussed so far? Again, I've already given you a hint, right? I said that he kind of epitomizes evil. What role does he eventually assume, and by what means? What havoc does he wreak later? What is his lasting legacy, and how does his role in the novel come to an end? Now, when you get to Dong Zhuo, and I'm quoting here something from page 31, we again encounter this question of virtuous behavior, in the context of Confucian morality. And you will see that there is a person who actually stands up to Dong Zhuo. He's called Ding Guan. He's mentioned in this poem, right? The traitor's plot to change a sovereign would soon consign to dust the shrines of Han, a court full of courtiers helpless in Dong Zhuo's hand, no one but Ding Guan to take a stand. 东贼前坏费力图，汉家宗社委丘须。满朝臣在戒囊括，唯有丁公是丈夫。So other than what the actual content of the poem is about, what is interesting about this is the actual purpose of the poem as a stylistic device. You will notice that throughout the novel there is actually a lot of poetry. Some of it is written probably by Luo Guanzhong. Some of it is written actually by very, very, very famous poets. We've already mentioned Su Dongpo. And poetry really plays a very important effect. What is the effect? What does the poetry do? And if we turn to the content of the poetry, what does it say about the values our author wishes to promote? If you, for example, just take this one poem as an example, what is he doing there? What is he saying about Dong Zhuo? What is he saying about Ding Guan? And are there any other poems in the opening chapters that left an impression on you? In what way? What is their significance for the development of the plot? So again, this is something that you might want to explore in a reading response were you to write a reading response for this week. Now, Dong Zhuo, of course, is very important with regard to that female character, Diao Chan, right? And again, you might want to focus on that in your response, but it will probably also come up in the reading quiz, so pay attention to that. Pay attention to Dong Zhuo and Diao Chan and Lü Bu and that whole relationship that develops. Good. I wanted to say just a couple of words about the reading response. And they should be about 300 words long, but they really should not be much longer than that. And they certainly should not exceed 600 words. That's the maximum. The key thing is that you have to work closely with the primary text. I don't want you to give me summaries, and I don't want you to just give me generalities. I want you to cite from the text. I want you to give me a page number. Yeah? I want you to focus on a character maybe, or an event that is noteworthy. I want you to tell me why you liked it or why you didn't like it. And ideally, you try to engage with the topics of the week, that are brought up in the course stream that we discuss in the class. So take a look at the sample reading response that I posted, and please let me know if you have any questions. Now for the island quiz, focus on the flow of the narrative and the fate of the main characters, and you will have 2 attempts at the quizzes. And here are again those prompts if you want for the reading response, right? I already mentioned them at the opening of the course stream. If you want to look at them again. And I promised you that I would leave you with a little surprise if you want. It's a cliffhanger as well. So I will introduce one more character from the novel to you, and see if you can work out who or what it is. And that's where we will pick up next week.